just a way of communicating, or does it also change policy, this new way of getting your message across, be it the Republicans or the Democrats?
Well, in this particular case, I'm very worried about the absence of policy. In fact, I'm tempted to say...
From both sides?
Well, no, because the president has threatened to block policy, and we can talk about what he said specifically in that vein. But I'm thinking, what State of the Union? That was a campaign rally speech last night. So he hit all of his talking points that he hits on campaign rallies. Let's not forget that this is the first president who declared his re-election campaign and actually created a re-election campaign the day after he was sworn into office. So he's actually been campaigning for these 2 years, and I think last night was
every president in a State of the Union address campaigns a little bit.
Yes, but no, he has an actual. Right. He started a real actual campaign, and I was worried at some of the standing ovations. I was very disheartened by the fact that when he talked about reinstating the nuclear arms race, the entire GOP got on their feet and applauded that. I thought, wow. When we talk about this fear of tribalism coming to America. It's here.
Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're taking in the spectacle that is every year, the State of the Union address in the United States. This one pushed back to the month of February because of that government shutdown in the U.S. We're talking about it with Ellen Kountz, Dean of Finance at Paris's INSEC Business School. Welcome back as well to Patrick Brady, who joins us from Chicago, former chair of the Illinois Republican Party and the founder of Next Generation Strategies. Gerald Olivier, editor of the France Amérique blog, columnist for Atlantico.fr, your upcoming book, On the Road to the White House. And she is the author of Hustle and Float, which comes out this month. Rahaf Harfoush, founder of the Red Thread Institute for Digital Culture. Donald Trump, in his speech, again reminding us, as Gerald Olivier was telling us just before the break, just how much he has changed the Republican Party when he claimed to defend the working class.
No issue better illustrates the divide between America's working class and America's political class than illegal immigration. Wealthy politicians and donors push for open borders while living their lives behind walls and gates and guards. Meanwhile, working class Americans are left to pay the price for mass illegal immigration. Reduced jobs, lower wages, overburdened schools, hospitals that are so crowded you can't get in, increased crime, and a depleted social safety net.
Now, we could obviously, I see you shaking your head over the substance of what he's saying, Ellen Kountz, but his use as well of the word working class. Now, in the old days, it was, left-wingers who talked about the working class.
I think he's doing it once again. I think what I'm realizing is how easy it is to stumble into some form of dictatorship that is that has cronyism and nepotism and fake justice and power grabs. He's saying things. What actually is happening on the ground, for example, two things that he said during his address were how much he opposes endless wars and how much he is in favor of criminal justice reform. The problem is, this is also the most understaffed and over-indicted presidency we've ever seen.
But when he uses the word working class, what does that mean?
Well, it really should mean middle class. And what the shutdown revealed, I mean, this was the longest shutdown in American history, 2 paychecks missed by federal workers, is that the middle class has truly disappeared. That, if we learned one thing from the shutdown in a very painful way, is that people had to sell their belongings and take McJobs to survive when government jobs and, being a government worker used to ensure a middle-class lifestyle in America.
Gerald Olivier, again, the comparison with Europe, we saw with Brexit that a lot of the people who voted for it were the people who traditionally in the old days voted for Labour. Mm-hmm. We've seen here in France the far right pick up the talking points that used to belong to the French Communist Party.
In a way. Mm-hmm.
Is that what Donald Trump is doing here when he talks about the working class?
I'm not sure he's doing exactly the same, but he is riding on a wave of populism that he even started himself, or actually that was started a little earlier, if you want to go back, by the Tea Party movement, which he grabbed on and made actually his base. What we're seeing in France is a segment of society which is also being disenfranchised, that feels lost, that feels overwhelmed by globalization, taking to the streets without any real program, without any real organization, just a sense of loss. A sense of loss, a sense of a disempowerment, a sense of being the ones who always pay and never get anything. And there was a feeling of certain resentment behind Donald Trump's election when he started his campaign. What I would like to say, however, and I strongly disagree with what you said, is that I think in 2 years, we've seen a radical change. And I would like to oppose the speech we heard last night to the inaugural speech, the American carnage to the hope for greatness, and choose greatness, which is what the theme of last night's expose, and how the tone has changed and how much more positive.
But that's just normal for an incumbent, right? To say, I'm doing a great job.
It's normal, but you don't always have the numbers to back it up. And what's strong here are the numbers.
Patrick Brady, where do you situate Donald Trump on an old school political scale? Is he conservative? Is he far right?
Yeah, well, you touched on he's not a conservative, and he doesn't fall into the typical Republican platform either. You pointed out the areas where he doesn't on trade and on other issues, but what he did do, and I'll give him credit for it. Again, I'm not a big fan, but I'll give him credit for it. He did tap into that. There is income inequality in this country, and there are a lot of people that feel they've been left out, and he tapped into that in the Midwestern states, and that's why he's president of the United States right now, because he was able to articulate, or at least reach out to those people and say, I've got a plan for you. And he was able to last night, whether you like it or not. There are some really good economic numbers in this country on unemployment, including wage growth. So I think he can rightfully say, I'm standing up for the working class. We've got a long, long way to go, but we have a lot of good things to talk about, and he did that last night. I have terrible problems with the way he addresses the immigration issue, the way he talks about the immigrants that come in and commit the crimes, where we do have a border security issue here. There's no problem, but we don't have issues in the threats that he talks about and he emphasized for 20 minutes in his speech. And that's where he loses a lot of Republicans, because we are a country, and Ronald Reagan on his birthday today, would have been his 108th birthday, was welcoming of immigrants. It's the strength of our country, and you can't demonize them. And I think that's what he did last night.
When he pits the working class against the political class, does that undermine democracy?
No, no, it doesn't at all. It doesn't at all. In fact, both parties do that. The political class is always the class you go after, and you represent the working class, because that's where the votes are. So I don't think that undermines democracy. Now, when he goes after the free press and some of the things, when he goes after judiciary, when he goes after the Justice Department, when he 10 minutes into the speech goes after and talks about the investigations, there's nothing going to get done unless these investigations stops. That's where he undermines democracy. But pitting the working class against the political class doesn't undermine democracy, in my opinion.
All right, Donald Trump never directly addressed his electoral defeat of last November in that State of the Union address. But after stating his backing for change in Venezuela, he did warn against the progressive wave inside the United States' Democratic Party.
Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
What did you make of that, Harfoush?
I mean, fundamentally, this is a campaign. This is almost a war on narrative. It's like we're living in separate realities, and there's been an erosion of a shared version of what is happening. So we're beyond the level of this statistic or that statistic. We're now talking about the history, the identity, the values of the United States. And I find this to be incredibly frustrating to watch because, historians will tell you that some of the greatest economic growth and democratic growth, some of the greatest advancements the U.S. has seen was during a time when there was a lot of government support for accessible healthcare, accessible education, accessible social services, things that the Republicans have been committed to gutting. So I think we've just started throwing around words like socialism and all this other stuff as a way to frighten people instead of really talking about the values of what made America a prosperous country once upon a time.
Yeah. I thought that after Bernie Sanders ran in 2016 that the word socialism was no longer taboo.
Well, it still is in many electors, including Donald Trump's. Now, I thought we started this conversation talking about social media. And to me, this line was directed at the younger generation, not Bernie Sanders, but Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and what she represents and the type of things she's been pushing, free healthcare, free education, and all kinds of elements that are very generous that everyone knows would never work because they would ruin the country, basically.
So there's a kernel of truth in what he's saying, that there is a change in U.S. politics.
There's a radicalization.
The Democratic Party is more left-wing than it used to be.
Absolutely. And there's a younger generation coming, and when you see who among the group of those who have already declared they were going to be running in 2020, the Harris, the Cory Booker, the what's her name from Massachusetts?
Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren, thank you. They're further left than a lot of the candidates we were used to, further left than even Hillary Clinton was. And the new wave, and Bill de Blasio in New York, Mr. Cuomo, governor of New York. We have a new Democratic Party, which in a way has been taken over by his left wing. And Patrick was explaining this a few minutes ago when he was talking about the importance of the primary. Because of gerrymandering, you don't need to win the general election. You need to win the primary. And in the primary, usually the more radical wing tends to participate in the vote. So that's the one you have to appeal to. And you can see it in politics every day.
Is there still, they've always talked about a silent majority, people who are not so radical to the left or to the right?
Let's see. I'm worried about a president who radicalizes progressives, because that is just radicalizing progress itself. And by conflating socialism as it may be practiced in some Latin American countries, as opposed to socialism as it could be practiced in democratic Nordic countries that have excellent social models, it's a shame, and it gets lost in sound bites and the rest. I think it's very disingenuous, and all apologies to the Republicans, especially the traditional Republicans, but if they don't cheat, they'll lose. Because they have a history, and it was originally called the Southern Strategy, where, and you mentioned earlier the Tea Party, they got into bed with the racists, and the racists took over the entire House, and now they live with them. And they have a really hard time separating themselves from racialized policies. This instauration of fear of Black and brown people coming over the border is, for me, an extension of when he made a very lame apology about, Barack Obama's birth certificate. And this, campaign rally last night, as we State of the Union, was very Nixonian in many ways.
It's very disheartening to hear what you say, because if they don't win, they cheat. I don't know if you can ever back it up with any kind of example to prove that.
Yeah, they don't cheat, they'll lose. Because they've had no way to reach out to, for example, Hispanics.
I don't know if you mean that he cheated when he was elected.
No. I'm talking about gerrymandering, redistricting.
Oh, but gerrymandering is not done by Republicans. It's done by everybody. It's done by everybody, and Democrats more than anyone, and everybody. I mean, every time there's a census, whoever is in charge knows that they'll be in charge for the next 10 years because of gerrymandering. So you can't blame one party when everybody does.
In this case, I think that this is a case of false equivalency, if I may. And this is one of the problems also, I think, of what your book deals with, is this idea that, one party's bad is as bad as the other party's bad. We have a felonious...
Is it easier to demonize the other than it used to be, Rahaf, Harfoush?
Yeah, I mean, of course it is, because now you have an ability to reach millions of people without being mediated through fact checkers, through journalists, through institutions that are designed to provide you with some sort of neutral coverage. Now he can say whatever he wants, he can tell whatever story he wants, and it goes directly out to the people. And I do just want to say, like, just for a statement, that when he does address comments to the younger members of the party, like those younger members like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, she didn't rise in a vacuum. She rose in direct response to an administration that was taking away and that was attacking a lot of immigrants, minorities, women, people, LGBTQA. And so I think for me, I see her and the new wave that came with her, a lot of women in positions of leadership. I see this as a generation of people, because let's not also ignore the fact that if you look at the people in that room, there was a distinct, old versus young generational issue here as well, that this younger group of diverse people wants to bring about some more positive change of what they need. So I don't know. I think it's easier than ever to tell the story that you want, because I can convince, I can probably get a lot of political supporters if I could tell them whatever they wanted to hear with zero backing it up.
But that's nothing new.
The reaching out is nothing new. The scalability at which you can reach people is new. Instead of just him in a stadium, he's reaching, millions and millions of people and then getting retweeted and shared, and certain clips are being taken out of context and being shared again. So this is a much different remix.
Let me ask Patrick Brady, do you feel as though citizens are becoming more sophisticated now in the way that they use Twitter and Instagram and Facebook? Or is it, you're able to touch the emotional nerve just the same as it was the case when these a couple of years back?
I don't think people are necessarily getting more sophisticated. I think they go to the Twitter feeds or the cable news network that supports what they already believe. And this has been going on for 20 years, maybe even longer here. And the campaigns that actually of social media, to their credit, was the Obama campaign.
Yeah.
Oh, the image seems to have frozen there with Chicago. We'll try to reconnect very quickly with Patrick Brady. Apologies for that. Gerald Olivier.
Yeah, I wanted to react to what Rahaf was saying when she was talking about Alexandra Cortez. She is the perfect example of what's wrong with the system and what we were talking about. She won the primary in an overwhelmingly Democratic district. And had an independent run against her, he probably would have won. But nobody did. And the Democratic candidate who lost in the primary decided not to run as an independent. But had he probably would have won. Lieberman did that a few years back when the same thing happened to him. So we see a case where an extreme candidate gets to Congress, even though probably a silent majority of people are there and just will not bother to vote or won't have access to the vote. And in that sense, the system is very much locked, and the system is geared toward the extremes.
Less so, perhaps, than in the past. Yes, there is voter suppression that we talked about and gerrymandering. We also saw the highest turnout in a midterm election in a century.
Yes, we can credit Donald Trump's election by waking up really a fiber of love of our democracy or not. You have to show it. There were huge movements that continue, Run for Something. A lot of these women came out of a movement called Run for Something, Run for Office, people who would never have seen themselves in office otherwise. But I still have to really disagree on what's radical. The tax plan, which was not a tax reform, it was just a tax cut, exacerbated income inequality in ways that we're just now starting to feel, and that'll come for years to come. More billions to the billionaires. And it's very hard to understand why the base is with him on that, because they seem to be the first group of people who suffer from it.
All right, we're experiencing the same thing in this country where people are questioning the whole system when it comes to taxes and when it comes to who pays their fair share for public services. At the end of the day, the more billions for billionaires, is that going to come back to haunt politicians if they do that?
I absolutely think so. I mean, I think you made the perfect point, which is what is so radical? What is she talking about that is so incredibly radical other than strengthening the same social net that Donald Trump mentioned as being weakened in his own address? I think we're going to start to see the rise of people using some of these technological platforms to raise awareness. Yes, she might have been a little bit more radical, but she was young. She had a crowd-funded campaign, much like Obama in 2008. She has an incredible use of social media, reaching people, getting her message out there, gaining support. And she has managed, after the election, to be one of the very few people who on a social media stage can challenge this president in terms of gaining people's attention. Sure. So I think she is a representative of a new hope for the Democratic Party, at least within the sense of being able to use some of these tools to reach out and connect people.
Yes.
So I think that this is going to be one of those things that, as the internet, I'm hoping we're going to see a little bit more transparency. We're going to start seeing more of the impacts, more of the ramifications of some of these policies. But I also would like to stay optimistic and say that I hope that the ramifications, as we see billionaires, more billions for billionaires, which I love, that we're going to see more people sort of take a political stance with their vote against it.
Patrick, Brady, do you get the sense, and perhaps this can be a little bit of a lesson for those practicing politics on this side of the Atlantic, that, everybody's kind of recalibrated now after what happened in 2016, and everybody's smarter at getting their message across?
Yeah, and she's been a genius at it. She's one of the most formidable people I've ever seen, especially at her age and where she's coming from. I mean, she won in a primary in New York, unheard of, and now she's a force. So good for her. But again, it depends on what the underlying message is, and the suggestion that she's not further left, way further left than Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, or certainly way further left than Bill Clinton, I think it's a bit misguided. Some of these policies, the attacking the billionaires, a lot of the stuff that she's going to attack billionaires to pay for health care and free college, it's just not true. I don't want to say it's a lie, but it's just not true. You could tax billionaires out of the country and it still would only fund the government for about 3 weeks. We need some good tax reform that helps the middle class, but the class warfare things or comments we hear from some of the far left Democrats, I don't think are productive. I don't think they're really good politics at the end of the day.
All right, so the idea of class warfare in the United States is where we'll leave it for now. I want to thank so much Patrick Brady for joining us from Chicago. I want to thank as well Ellen Kountz, Gerald Olivier, Rahaf Harfoush. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, François. So, quick look at how this has been playing out online, social media, cartoons, headlines, whatnot.
Rahaf talked about memes.
Well, yes, we'll get to the memes. Okay. I'll start with a New Yorker cartoon that was anticipating the State of the Union address and imagining a funky drinking game that people could get involved in. Remember, every time he threatens the foundations of our democracy, we drink. Now, in fact, he sort of
martinis is what.
That's right. Well, whatever your tipple is. In any case, he did strike a note of unity, at least in terms of, as the French would say, la forme et le fond. There was the kind of outer signs of unity, but perhaps as some of the coverage, I'll show you some more articles, but essentially what they're saying here is Trump called for unity, but on his terms. There was soaring rhetoric, but really when it came down to it, he was sticking the course, so to speak. This is in a BuzzFeed News, Tarini party. This is her take on it. Donald Trump's State of the Union bipartisan dreams were divorced from reality, from his own reality. Indeed, in the few days leading up to the State of the Union address, he was highly critical of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. He allegedly called Chuck Schumer a nasty son of a bee in front of reporters. So that doesn't necessarily strike a tone of bipartisanship generally. So it was sort of a departure from the default mode Donald Trump, I think you could say. Trump doubles down. This is in The Atlantic. In his State of the Union address, the president had the option of reaching out. He chose to stay the course, essentially on everything from the wall to Afghanistan to Supreme Court nominations. It seems like he's doubling down as opposed to trying to find compromise positions. This is a cartoon that sort of picks up on the bipartisanship and the unity and whatnot against the backdrop of a red brick border wall, perhaps. So that's one cartoon that was in the Sacramento. I think that was, no, the next one is in the Sacramento Bee. I interrupt my stirring call for national unity with a whole load of issues that are perhaps a little bit less striking less of a chord of union. You can see there Nancy Pelosi's eye popping open. And speaking of Nancy Pelosi, her sarcastic clap became the State of the Union's biggest meme. Indeed, it went massively viral. She probably had that pre-planned, I would say, in an era of social media. There was.
Do you think it was pre-planned?
I don't think it was
spontaneous.
I think she just went with what she felt, and the internet just loved it.
Well, indeed, the internet did love it. That sort of.
pulled it off.
It was called a walrus clap as well. But certainly, this tweet says it caught the mood. Pelosi's clap is the mood, I suppose, for those who don't like Donald Trump. It should be fair to say. When I tell my wife I changed a diaper, there were various different issues like that going up. In other words, well done, you're fantastic. I don't really think that. And then the actual image of Nancy Pelosi, sarcastic clapping, slow clapping, walrus clapping, appeared everywhere, including in the White House Christmas card. So there you go, lots on that. There was also, of course, many references to the fact that many wore white on the Democratic side. Of course, a reference to suffragettes and women's rights. And this is one cartoon picking up on that. Congresswomen are wearing white to the State of the Union. What's that going to accomplish? And then, well, actually, you're all looking the same too, just in negative. So there was lots on it. I could have gone on all night, but that's just a selection of some of the memes. Certainly, I think there was an awareness with this, if not Nancy Pelosi's gesture, that social media would be picking up on images in particular, and there was, I suppose, that was kept in mind in the visuals, I guess.
All right, many thanks for that, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.